Now that our HTML is set, our HTML document is set, we're going to move to our CSS file so that we can add our stylings. So we begin first of all by creating our classes in our @media query, and we need to remember that those classes are created in our media query. So first of all, we're going to start with the very first class that we created, okay, and that class is our mgrid. So let's go, my dot mgrid, because this is a class that I've created, curly braces, and I'm going to add my styling. I'm going to give it a display of grid because I want 2 columns, and in my grid column template, grid template columns, I am going to do something new. Instead of using auto twice or 3 times, I'm going to use FRs, which are actually new ways of creating flexible columns. FR actually stands for fractions, okay, of units. So assigning a number of FRs to a column will actually size the column appropriately. So I want the icon that I'm going to create for my navbar to be placed in a smaller column, and of course the title of the page to be placed in the wider column. So I'm going to declare the size of the smaller column first, and that will be 0.25 FR. Now sometimes it's a shot in the dark. You need to keep trying until you get the right sizes. So I already tried this out and I realized this is the size that works. So my first column will be 0.25 of a fraction of the unit, and I'll space, and I'll give the second column 2.5 FRs. So what I should have is a small column. My first column on the left will be small, and of course my column on the right will be way wider. This is the effect that I'm looking for. Okay, the next class I'm going to style is the drop down. The drop down will contain the icon that represents the menu. So we begin, of course, by typing our class in here, dot drop down, and we add our styles. So I want to give my drop down a position of relative, simply because I am going to place something else in here that I would need to position. And if we go back to positioning, the parent element should have a position of relative if you're going to use absolute positioning and use the top down or try to center an object within that element. Okay, and then I'm going to give it a display of inline block, simply because I want the objects that I'm going to place in there to be stacked one on top of the other. Lastly, I'm going to give it a width of 100% because I want the objects to span the entire div. So this is my drop down. Next, I am going to create my icon that represents my menu, and this is a simple trick I learned from a lot of research which is simply to style 3 divs so that what they create are actually 3 bars to represent the hamburger menu. Okay, so I am going to now style my M bars So this is M bar. And I'm just going to give them I'm going to give it a width of 25 px and a height of 3 px. What I'm really trying to do is create the illusion of a hamburger menu, so I'm just trying to create 3 bars. And I'm going to give this one a background color. So it's very visible of, let's say, black. Okay, so this is where we are thus far. I'm going to add to this a margin so that it can start at a certain point in my div. A margin of 3 px and 0. Okay, I'll have an O here and 0. Okay, so this is how I'm going to style my bars. Okay guys, so let's have a look at what we've done so far. If you look at our preview window, notice that we've created our icon that represents our navigation menu. We have our title of our page, home, and notice we have our 2 links to the other pages, about and contact. I will just stretch this to see what happens, and notice as I stretch it, the first menu appears and the one we're working with appears below it. Of course, later on we're going to style this so that this one will appear as the screen increases above 600 px. But for now, we're just going to reduce this, so this is what we see. This here was created using our ember styling. So notice if we change the color here to white, notice that the color of our icon changes as well. So this is just a little something like I said, I learned by doing a lot of research, and it actually works. So we shall continue with our styling. So the next step is to style this content. It is important that we hide this content so that it only shows up when we hover over the menu button or when we click on it. How do we do that? So to style our drop-down content, we're going to start by, of course, creating our class. It's called drop-down content. And then we're going to add certain very important things. One, we do not want the content to show unless the user hovers over the icon. So we're going to give this thing a display of none. And as soon as I do that, notice that the links disappear. The next step is to position the elements, okay, in this class. We're going to position them, and we're going to position them absolute. And after we do that, we're going to add our background color. We just make it white for now, and we're going to decide on the width of the menu when it does drop down. So we're going to give it a minimum width, let's say of 160 px. That should be enough for phone. Now let's just add a few styling features. So I'm just going to add a little box shadow, and remember guys, you can get this using your online CSS generator. So I'm going to add a box shadow, and finally I'm going to give it a Z index. Now you should be wondering, what is this Z index business all about? A Z index is actually a way of stacking content. So the idea is that the higher the Z index, the more likelihood that the content will show over other content. So content with higher Z index will stack on top of a content with a lower Z index. And so we're using that basically for the elements in our anchor tags to show when we hover over this icon. Okay, so having done that, done the styling of our drop down content, notice of course that the text that was originally here has disappeared. The next step is to style our drop down button. It kind of looks plain, so we want to give it some color, a little size. We want to declare what the cursor should be like when we hover over it. So we're going to do that now. So I'm going to create my class of drop button. This is what I had originally in my HTML document, and I'm going to start my styling by first of all giving it a background color. Let me just use a background color that should work. I'll just use dark green for now. Yeah, dark green. And as soon as I do that, you should notice that the color of my button changes. The next step, I will increase this. I will declare the size of my background so it can just take up the full space in the element. So I'm just going to declare it at 100%, so that if I'm resizing, I do not get an effect that is a bit off. Then I'm going to give my button a width again of 100%, meaning it will take up the full space in the element. Okay, and I am going to add some padding of, let's say, 10px. Okay, so if we have a look at it now, it's beginning to take shape. It looks a little bit better. It was a bit smaller a while ago, but now with the padding especially, notice that we have equal space between the object and the border of the element, and that's what padding does. Okay, create space between the object or the text and the edge of any element that it is contained in. So we're going to continue our styling. We're going to I don't think we're going to add a border, so let us just add our cursor, and our cursor will be a pointer. Okay, and I'll remove any border by making it clear that there is no border, so that we will see a seamless connection between this button and the other part of this grid, which is of course the part that the section of the grid that has the page title. Okay, so I think this is fair enough. So the next step is to style the other part of our grid, the section or the column that contains the title of the page. And I remember that I called this a title, which stood for active page title. So I'm going to just give my text a color of white. Okay, and it disappears because the background of the page is white. So I think I definitely need to change the background. So I'll give it a background color of dark green, so it matches it matches nicely with the other column. So you notice how seamless it is now. And I need to add some padding so that the text doesn't stick to the top of the column. So I'm going to give it a padding of, let's say, 11px. Beautiful. And again, it's trial and error, so I tested this to see which of the paddings work best. and I found that this one did. And finally, I'm going to align the text so that it stays left. Of course, I can align it right, and you will see the effect. As soon as I do that, it goes to the other end of the page. But for now, I'm just going to keep it left. And that is how we style the look of the navbar thus far.